Oh yeah. Oh, welcome to the live stream, yeah. 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 We're gonna welcome you to the stream. Hello. Oh yeah. Where you're from? Hello from Denmark and Switzerland. Hello. Ooh, yeah, let's see where you're from. Germany, oh, says Villager 255. Hello, says Game Secures. Oh, hey, Fardulican, good to be here again. Hello from Calgary, from Chechnya, from New Zealand, from Bangladesh. Woo. Welcome to the live stream, yeah. Welcome to the live stream. Oh, yeah. Welcome to the live stream. Hello from Lebanon, U.S., Romania, America, Philippines, U.S., West Coast, Norway, Constance, Germany. Welcome to the live stream, yeah. Welcome from Texas, Romania. Live stream, yeah. Right. Now today we've got a very special guest with us on the live stream. I want you all to give a very warm welcome to one of my favorite people right now. We got Jon Perry in the house, people. Say hello, John.
Hello, how are you all doing?
Well, I can't speak for them. Let's see what they have to say. I'm doing all right, actually. I'm doing pretty fabulous. It is not Grant Sanderson, Love Cupper. It is, oh, never mind. All right. So.
Oh, I got a what's up from the comments.
You got a what's up specifically
from
to you?
King.
State it clearly,
King
what's
Gaming.
up? Yeah. Hello, Jon Perry, says Christoph Nagy. Yeah. Welcome to the live stream, yeah. Welcome, John. Welcome.
I'm happy to be here.
To the live stream, yeah. All right, so we got to, like I said, this is Jon Perry. We did a conversation on his live stream a couple days ago. We did an attempted conversation on my live stream, and we failed. How you doing?
Yeah, I hope everyone can hear me this time, and I hope that I'm loud enough that you know.
Non-Liquidian Dreamer says they can hear you, so
Sweet.
That's good. How's the balance, people? Tell me in the chat, and John can probably adjust it on his end. Loud and clear. They say.
I could turn up if I have to.
Okay,
Sweet.
awesome.
Good to go. All right.
Yeah. All right. So before this was on, we were talking about your day-to-day life because you live with someone who's in the middle of being prepared for the ICU. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So my wife Marilyn, she is a nurse, and about a year ago she signed up saying she wanted to move. She was in pediatrics. She wanted to go to the ICU. And that was before there was a huge catastrophe here.
This is just based on like wanting to do good for people, eh?
Yeah. Now, when we first started dating, she had said that she wanted to someday go to like an outbreak somewhere and help out in one. And so we always kind of had this in mind that we would travel someday so she could work at an outbreak. But one came to us. What do you know?
Wow, that is good luck in your bad luck.
Yes.
I was asking people on Twitter because I had this thought one day, and it was basically like there's this kind of weird hope in me that like if something terrible happens to me because of the pandemic, it'll happen early enough that like I can put it on Twitter and people will still care. Like, like before it's just so overrun with stories about bad things happening that people just don't care anymore. Like I don't know. That's one of the saddest things to me is the idea of like your tragedy is so normal. And so I asked people like, is there a word for that? And apparently in German, because Germans always have like weird compound words for things. There is a word for having good luck in your misfortune. that kind of applies in cases like this. So I think
Yeah, yeah.
whatever it is, you've got that too.
Yeah. So yeah, but so she was supposed to. We first of all, we were supposed to get married last week.
Mm.
That got postponed by the government. Then, so she had the week off, which was nice. So as all this stuff is ramping up in Canada, she had the week off. Then she was supposed to go to a month-long training specifically for the ICU. Maybe I'm not supposed to talk about this too much, but um, they they basically said,
We can edit this out when we compile the stream if you want.
I'm sure it's fine. Basically, they said we're actually just going to train a bunch of nurses, streamline them in COVID only. So they've got her, and so her normal training has been canceled, and it's just 3 days of COVID training. So she's going to be, it's going to be known amongst the other nurses that there's going to be this batch of COVID only. So they're kind of like the it's like the backup panic nurses,
right?
And she won't actually start doing that until she's needed. So they're taking the normal ICU nurses first, and then they're taking these backup trainees and throwing them in when they're overwhelmed. But so she's got basically all she does is she goes and she studies. She's been her whole vacation has just been studying to get ready for this. Now she's got 3 days of classes. They might have more classes between now and when they actually call her to be on duty. But she's going to be assigned to what they've called COVID town, which is a chunk of the hospital. Yeah, a chunk of the hospital cleared out just for COVID patients. And so it's exciting. It's terrifying and exciting. Terrifying because they're probably going to run out of personal protection equipment. Not because Canada is somehow horrible, but because the entire world is out of personal protection equipment for nurses. So the stuff doesn't exist in the universe right now. So, private industries ramping up, trying to make that not happen, but it's probably going to happen, which means we're probably going to both get sick. And how it's been happening in Italy and other places is nurses get sick and the doctors say, well, keep working until you can't. And
so they don't really have an option. It's like if you unless you're flat out to the point where you need a spot at the hospital, like it's all hands on deck. Like around, like in talking to people in the medical community around here, and it's not even like it's. I mean, Quebec jumped up this week from what is it like a couple hundred cases to now we're over 2,000.
We jumped from 200 to 2,000 in like 6 days.
Yeah.
But a lot of that is because testing.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So it's showing the true scope of it as opposed to our naive hope that it was all going to be great around here by some miracle.
Yeah. Well, you and I didn't have that naive hope.
Well, I mean, I think you and I were even a little probably a little over paranoid. I mean, not that necessarily it's bad to be over paranoid, but in that we started wondering, like you started wondering very early on about cases that weren't being tested that nobody was thinking about. Like, is this is this the wave? Because there have been like strange other viruses passing through which are causing a lot of confusion in a lot of people.
Yeah, I actually thought it was here earlier than it was because there was a bout of pneumonia that was hitting kids, and we found out that was something different. And that's actually resolved now. So, but it was pretty scary because little kids were getting pneumonia.
Both of my niece and nephew got it, but they're fine.
Yeah.
They got on antibiotics, and the antibiotics worked fine. So, it seems to have been standard flu, standard bacterial. But yeah, it just puts everyone on edge. And like, I'm getting messages from people saying like, how do I convince my friends that they haven't already had COVID? Because they're like, oh, well, I had this strange illness in February or in January or even like in December before, like when this thing was first being discovered. And they're saying, oh, that was probably it. And like, I'm safe to go out now. Because like when you're so focused, I feel like when you're so focused on this one illness, you forget how immensely complicated the world and like how complicated illness is and how many different viruses there are out there.
Yeah.
And now like anyone who gets a sniffle, it's like, could it be? Is this the one?
Yeah, and that's the real frustration with this. It's like the symptoms are a headache and it's a cough and a fever and shortness of breath. Those are the symptoms of everything. So
Yeah.
it's it is very frustrating.
Yeah.
But we're what we're seeing, the good news is that 80% of the people confirmed to have it are do so well that they don't even need to go to the doctor. About 20% do need to go to the doctor, and from them, only a small percentage are actually put on a ventilator.
Mm.
Of those that are put on a ventilator, there's about a 50% chance of survival. So um, that's what we've seen in Italy. So it's
Yeah. Do you have a sense of what the actual like what the actual denominator is on this? Like whenever people talk about this number of like, I don't know, deaths per cases or whatever, do you like it's possible to miss cases. It's also possible to misdiagnose people who die of pneumonia and think that it wasn't this. But like,
right.
do you have it like as someone who's followed this basically since the outbreak in China? What's your best guess on like what the true figures are?
Well, we can't know until it's done, really.
Yeah.
But Johns Hopkins has put out a projection saying that, like, worst case scenario, they think it's going to be, I think they said the fatality rate's going to end up being 0.6.
0.6, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a projection by just one of their researchers.
So
So
that means that we're like way undercounting the number of people who
who
have
are
it.
infected.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's it's that doesn't sound like very much. So a lot of people have been saying, "Oh, this is just like the flu." The problem, of course, is that so many people need to be hospitalized from this that it overwhelms the hospitals, and then you get a bunch of people that will die from normal stuff. Like
Mm,
you you have a really bad leg break, you can die from that if you don't get treatment, right? If
right.
you have internal bleeding and so on, and you're losing, yeah, your blood pressure drops too low. So people are gonna, if we overwhelm the hospital systems, which is what is happening everywhere, and it's projected to happen here as well. If that happens, we're gonna have problems.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
we're gonna have deaths that are unnecessary. Now, actually, Maryland just got home, and the dogs seem to be doing okay.
Oh
Sometimes they
yeah,
really freak out.
you had been worried
Yeah.
about some rogue little ones. When
Yes.
how long have you had those dogs?
Well, Maryland's had them since I've been here for almost 2 years, and she's had them for 6 years, I
Okay,
think.
and she like they are they I'm like I'm imagining being a dog in a house full of dog skulls and wondering whether or not that would be cause for concern. Like this guy moves in with my master. He's got a bunch of dog skulls. He keeps buying more. Do you take them down and show them to them?
um, they just think they're chew toys. So, I mean, they actually, these ones here, because I had moved from the US to Canada, I couldn't take any of my real skulls. I could not figure out the laws to do that. Eventually I'd need to sit down and figure all that out. But so I've only taken my replicas with me. So these are all just made of plastic.
Wait, so
So
how many more do you have?
how many more skulls do
Yeah,
I have? I
yeah.
have a lot. I used to work for a wildlife center, and I'd prepare stuff for them. I'm probably going to donate everything that I have to them. And sometimes, if I could get permission from Fish and Wildlife, I would, and from the center, I would take some of them home. But actually, I never kept any. I took them home and I made videos with them and I brought them back. I have a collection. My personal collection all comes from a couple of estate sales. There was a guy when I was living in Tennessee who was a taxidermist, and he was just selling all this stuff. So I got a bunch from him. But yeah, I've got
Did
pretty much everything.
was he
It,
selling like bones in like various bins? Like here's all the skulls. Like how do you?
no,
I've
he
never been
opened
to a
up.
bone sale.
He opened up his garage, and there was just piles of bones from every species from around the world, like that you could imagine. And a lot of them were illegal for me to own. So because he lost some of the permits to have them, and he's like, yeah, I don't know what you can have there. So I just I took a bunch of them, and then I figured out which ones are legal for me to keep, and I gave them back the ones that were not. So
Man.
yeah, I had a bunch of stuff. It was,
So there's like depending on the species, there's different, like you're allowed to keep a dog skull, but like what are the skulls that you're not allowed to hold on to yourself that you have to like turn over
well,
to
there's a lot
proper
of
authorities?
stuff. There's a lot of stuff in Oregon that's illegal to own because Native Americans have rights to them.
Hmm.
So like eagle, anything with an eagle, for example, any eagle.
Ah.
I think any bird of prey. Well, bird of prey are there's a bunch of rules. Like I
Mm.
had someone at Fish and Wildlife that just told me,
All
and
right.
it's a mess. The laws are a mess. So
Fair enough.
I had someone go through that and help me. But
Owl skulls are crazy. You should get an
yeah,
owl
yeah,
skull.
yeah.
It's like,
Well, I don't own one, but I did borrow one from the Wildlife Center. I did a video on it, so you can watch that on the Stated Casually channel.
ooh,
There's a
I haven't really checked out your backlog on that second
yeah.
channel.
I have a What's It Wednesday thing I did for several months, where I'd do a skull every Wednesday and you'd guess what it is. And then the next Wednesday I would explain what it was and then show you a new one. So people can go through that series. That's fun. It's super fun.
That
Uh,
sounds, yeah, that sounds
yeah.
really. I don't know if it's mostly skulls. That sounds really odd. What else was on there?
It's just skulls and talons and
Okay.
sometimes fossils. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting to there's so much you can learn about an animal when you're looking at how its bones work. It's there's some very fascinating contraptions in the skulls of animals. Like different birds will move they can actually move their top part of their beak as well as the bottom,
Hmm.
and it's
Like
through
it's like a hinge.
it's a pseudo hinge. It's actually just a really oily thin piece of bone,
Hmm.
and they can move the top of their face up and down. So there's not actually a joint there. It's just flexible bone. It's thinned, and it's only in some species. A lot of species have really solid upper beak, and others have this really thin layer or thin spot, so they can actually move it with muscles of their face. Pretty
Weird.
cool.
Yeah,
Like parrots are extremely the top and bottom move really really well. Um,
that makes sense because
yeah,
you see a parrot like it doesn't hinge down the way that people's jaws do. Like your face
yeah,
stays in place and your jaw drops. Parrots, yeah,
yeah,
they've got like the two
yeah,
way thing. That's really
yeah.
weird.
And that gives them incredible dexterity. So there's birds that really use their beaks for sensitive movements usually can move both the top and the bottom. Whereas a duck, the top is just a solid chunk, and they smash their food up against the roof of their mouth when they're eating. So
Huh. Do you
yeah,
find do you think you have is there something about things that other people find slightly gross in biology that you that drive you? Because like when I came to your house, the first things that you showed me were your skulls
yeah,
and your like whiptail scorpion and tarantula. And then
yeah,
like
yeah,
I see you have like pictures in Ecuador where you've got like bugs on your face and stuff.
yeah.
Is like is it just that everything in biology is interesting, or is there something like more interesting about things that people would generally find macabre or kind of like beyond the norm?
I don't know. That's a good question. So when I was a kid, I was super fascinated with seeing dead stuff by the side of the road rot. Like that was one of the most fascinating things to me.
All
And
right, we're getting into childhood.
yeah, so and I thought that I was messed up for that. Like I thought it was a problem. And it wasn't until like I was in high school and the internet was a thing that I realized there's this whole world of taxidermy where
Yeah.
other people do this too, and it's a normal fascination. So I don't know. I've been fascinated in bones
Yeah,
for a long
I
time.
think it's more common to be fascinated by it than to like admit to being fascinated by it and
Yeah,
make it part of your
yeah,
identity. Like just the amount of the amount of interest that like Emily Grassley has on the Brain Scoop channel, where it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
we're gonna take this roadkill wolf and put it in a box full of bugs who eat all of its flesh, and then we're gonna take
Right,
out its yeah.
right.
Did you ever do that kind of thing when you were preparing skulls?
Yeah, yeah. When I worked for the Wildlife Center, I would do. Well, I only did it once. I prepared a red tail hawk wing for display, and that was fun. So we had
A
a
red
bone
tail
box.
hawk wing.
Yeah. So it was one of our patients, and he didn't make it.
Mm.
And I think we made the display to send to another education place because people don't really like it when we use our own animals that had died there. I guess there's kind of like some I don't know, conflict of interest if you're getting cool teaching tools from the animals that you failed to save, right? So
I can imagine that that would be
yeah,
ripe for abuse by the right person.
yeah. So wildlife centers share their carcasses with each other. It's weird,
All right.
but so so yeah, I did that. I did a little bit of that. So dissecting the wing, and it's really fascinating. It's really neat to see how everything is structured and
Hmm.
how intricate these little machines are that we call our bodies.
Hmm.
They're just the way that the feather system works in a bird is so spectacular. And then I was just taking it apart to do the bones of the wing
Yeah,
for a
I feel
display.
like I don't even have a really good sense of in a bird like what is like especially on the wing like what is flesh and what is feather. Like I
Yeah,
saw
yeah.
uh just like an image shared on Twitter the other day of like an eagle that I guess had escaped an encounter with I don't know like a sea lion or something that had
Hmm.
like taken a chunk out of its like it looked like it had a wing and then just like a piece of it missing like right up to the top
Yeah,
little protrusion there. Is it like is that wing pretty much entirely just like feathers except for a little fleshy
yeah,
like
yeah.
bony part at the
Almost,
top?
almost completely. I mean, they have an arm and a hand
Hmm.
inside their wing. So now let's see if I can do this right. So this would be the bird's wing,
Okay.
and
That's like
off
the
of it,
actual arm part.
yeah, off
Okay.
of it would stick feathers that extend like 3 times the length of the actual arm. And the hand only has 3 fingers. 2 of them are fused. One of them is still movable, their pointer finger. Some people think it's their thumb. It's actually their pointer finger. It can still move. It's called the bastard wing, and it's got little tiny feathers on it that it sticks out when it's breaking only.
Hmm.
And it looks like a second little wing. It's got a bunch of feathers sticking off of it.
It's kind
And
of it's
so when
like
they're
an
when they're trying to
like an
slow
airplane
down,
flap kind of thing.
yeah. And the other two fingers are stuck together, and the main flight feathers come off of the hand and those fingers that are fused. That's where the bulk of the wing is coming on. It's coming off the hand, and then the secondary flight feathers come off the forearm. And in most species, no flight feathers come off of the upper arm.
Hmm.
It's just it's really short and just goes right into the body. And it's got what are called covert feathers over it, which just kind of smooth out the contour of the wing. So uh, yeah, I
So
I've
in a bird, it's like most of the wings are kind of this part. Like, what would this be? This part of in a human, and then the hand is kind of fused together like that,
yeah, yep,
as opposed to bats, where it seems like like everything sort of contracted and the hand became the
yeah,
entire wing.
right, right.
Hmm.
So yeah. Birds have a very long forearm and a long hand. Yeah,
Yeah. Did you
I
see that ancient bird that was discovered in amber a few weeks ago? Oh, has he? Yeah.
so they're that's being reevaluated.
Oh,
But
really?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that was fairly interesting. But yeah, it's being reevaluated because
So
people aren't sure if it is what they thought it was.
okay, so what did they think it was? Because or like what did they think it was? Because I saw a
Yeah,
picture that looked like a little bird skull inside a piece of amber with feathers coming off of it. Like it seems pretty. It
I
seems pretty obvious to me, but I mean I don't know what else it could have been. Like it was some sort of dinosaur, yeah.
I didn't follow the story close enough to even know. I just
Okay.
know that the main paleontologist that I follow, who was really excited about that, then became unexcited about it like 2 days later. And I'm not sure if that was because the animal isn't what they thought it was, or if it's because the fossil was obtained in a super illegal, messed up
I,
way.
I
Like,
did I did hear people
yeah,
talking about that. Yeah.
yeah. So a lot of times paleontologists try to shun that because bad behavior is common in paleontology and in anthropology.
Hmm.
Uh, like just screwing over poor countries and taking stuff from groups that have a right to it. And so a lot of people who are responsible in the field try to immediately shun it if they know that's what's happened. And so I can't tell if that's what's going on there. I just haven't followed the story well enough, or
Yeah.
if it's because the animal isn't what they thought it was. But yeah.
Yeah, because I suppose it could be less of an actual divergence and just like I don't know, a baby something that we've already classified and know very well. I mean, it's still a very cool image.
Yeah, yeah,
That little
yeah,
skull in amber.
yeah. I think they were saying it's the smallest bird ever discovered, which, and I think that claim might be false. But anyways, yeah, I don't know enough about that to really bother talking about it. But
fair enough. Yeah. I don't know. So I don't know. What should we talk about? You want to talk about viruses? You were telling me about what were we interested in talking about? I wanted to talk about like your video that everybody's watching right now is called "Where Do New Viruses Come From?"
Yeah,
I have a slightly different question, which I think was a question that you might have posed to me as a possible question. So I don't think I can claim credit for it. But just like, where do viruses come from? Forget new viruses. Like,
yeah,
like are we? What is known about this? Like, is a virus a thing that is as old as biology? Is it something that at some point managed to sneak out of a biological cell and like gain independence, and now it roves around like I don't know, like those face cancers and the Tasmanian devils, or like I don't know, what do people think? Have viruses emerged like multiple times because there's just kind of an easy structure?
Yeah. So virologists debate this, and unfortunately, it's really hard. It's actually impossible to get a solid answer for sure on everything because viruses do not fossilize. They're super fragile.
Right.
They break apart before they can fossilize. I mean, we do have fossils of bacteria, but we do not have fossils of viruses. And so we can't look to the stones for clues. So all we can do is look at genomes. A lot of viruses insert their genes into their host's genome. They've actually inserted it. So HIV is one of them that does that. The coronaviruses don't do that, but HIV will actually insert its genome into the host's genome. And so if that ends up making it into a sperm cell or egg cell, that can be passed on and it becomes a genetic fossil. So if you look at the human genome, we've got tons of virus, like dead virus genomes in our own genome.
Right.
And you can look at, okay, well, how many organisms share the exact same dead virus genomes that humans have? And you can, if you know how long ago that organism split from us in the evolutionary tree, so if you find it in chimps and humans, for example, you can say, oh, that was at least 7 million years ago that virus infected our ancestor.
Right.
So you can say, oh, that virus, that's kind of what its genome would have looked like 7 million years ago, or 7 million years or older ago. So you can do things like that to kind of understand the history of viruses, but that's pretty much it. And as you might imagine, that doesn't give us very much information about the origin of viruses themselves. But there are three main hypotheses. One is that viruses represent a branch of the evolutionary tree that branched off before cells were really a thing. So this really has to sit on top of the RNA world hypothesis or other origin of life hypotheses. And all of these hypotheses are sketchy. Like we don't know exactly how life got started. So there's a lot of doubt on all of these origin of life hypotheses. But so the idea that viruses are a branch from before cells were true cells, that's one possibility.
Like that they at some point everything was kind of replicating badly, like without proper, I don't know, without all the machinery of cells,
right?
And that viruses split off at that time. Would they have been like more functional at replicating on their own than they are now, or at least like didn't have to compete with things that are a lot better, and then later they became parasitic and kind of gave up their like self-replication?
So what we believe with the RNA world hypothesis, and it's not, again, there's a lot of people that are saying that we need to give up on this model or dramatically change it with new information that's coming out now. But people think that the RNA world hypothesis is too strict.
Hmm.
But a pure RNA world hypothesis states that early on there were chains of RNA. There was no DNA, there was no protein, there's no amino acids, none of that. There were chains of RNA that were somehow replicating in the natural environment. So there was some natural environment that was producing nucleotides. So RNA is like DNA. It's a big long chain of smaller molecules called nucleotides.
Right.
So nature was somehow producing these nucleotides and somehow binding them together into chains. And then there was a process where those chains could replicate their sequence and create copies of themselves.
Which is not so ridiculous because they
No,
like RNA does in fact catalyze its own replication,
right.
right?
So we call this non-enzymatic template-directed replication. And there are experiments suggesting that this is possible. There are problems with it that haven't been worked out yet, but a lot of the problems that we've had have been solved. I mean, we've been making rapid progress on finding natural environments that could take a chain of RNA. If you have free nucleotides of RNA in the environment as well, you can make copies of it.
Right.
And the really neat thing about RNA is that it can act as a template for its own replication. And also it can fold up into a three-dimensional structure. And that three-dimensional structure, depending on the three-dimensional structure, can have enzymatic properties. And what I mean by that is that it can cause weird chemical reactions to happen in its environment and can do so consistently. So it might be able to dissolve a bit of rock, or it might be able to, different shapes will have different functions. And so the idea is that if you have a bunch of these chains that are making copies of themselves, and sometimes with errors, so you get descent with modification, true Darwinian evolution happening, you could get enzymes with functions that actually help that chain of RNA reproduce better. So maybe you get an enzyme that helps produce more nucleotides, which are the building blocks of RNA. So it's able to take precursor molecules in its environment and fuse those together.
This would still be
produce...
an RNA enzyme, like an enzyme that's made out of the same chain structure. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And then you could, so that's one thing that natural selection would select for. Like, oh, well, there's a bunch of free nucleotides around this chain of RNA because this chain of RNA can actually make nucleotides. And because there's a lot of nucleotides around it, it's going to replicate faster. So you get evolution happening.
Could you have like chains of RNA that are like cannibalistic, or at least like I don't know, that get into eating, like because I imagine that if you've got a whole bunch of these complicated RNA chains floating around, it's a lot more efficient to go and grab one of them and pull it apart and repurpose it for yourself than to just get it from the environment. Yeah,
absolutely. So these things, this is a really neat thing about evolution. If you have descent with modification, so you have parents giving rise to offspring that are slightly different than their parents, and if some of them are better at reproducing than others within a specific environment. So if you have descent with modification and you have natural selection, you get evolution. An automatic competition pops into existence. There is a competition between these replicators, and there's no brain, there's no will, there's no desire, there's nothing like that. It's just happening because it happens. It's just a natural consequence of having those two, descent with modification plus selection. You get this evolutionary competition that starts up. And from that, you're going to get parasites. Some are going to be predators. Some are going to not be predators. Are going to focus on the other chemicals in the environment, exploiting those. Some will exploit each other. There's all sorts of weird things that start to happen in this environment.
Yeah, you're going to need an equilibrium, because if everyone is predators, then there's there's nothing to predate. It's the same thing as now with grass and sheep and or grass and deer and wolves. You can't have just one in those process, or they all fail.
Right.
What is so one hypothesis is viruses just spring out of RNA world the way that they everything else sprang out of RNA world. They're a different branch from way back there. Okay.
Well, okay. The big innovation in life from this RNA world, if we want to say that there was a pure RNA world, there probably never was a pure RNA world. There's probably always a bunch of other, well, there were always definitely a bunch of other molecules in the mix. And a lot of people now are thinking that proteins, really small proteins, so small you shouldn't even call them proteins, really small peptides, so a collection of amino acids stuck together, were probably in the mix very early on, and they were being produced naturally by the environment as well. And this type of chemistry is really well understood now. We can get simulating an asteroid or an early Earth environment. We can get I think it's up to 21 amino acids long. We get these pretty big proteins.
Okay.
21 amino acids long, and those can form clusters to form even larger groups. And the really amazing things about these proteins is that they fit RNA. They form these symbiotic relationships where their backbone sticks to RNA backbones in a way that helps the two molecules be more stable. So it's like they're meant to be, you know. Okay. They really fit well together. And so the mixed origin hypothesis would say that chains of RNA and these small peptides would be cooperating very early on, and forming these complexes that would help them be more stable in their environment. And if you change the acidity, if you change the temperature, they're going to separate. If you change it again, they'll come back together. So there's all sorts of weird things that can happen here. The big innovation in life is that you have the evolution of the ribosome. And the ribosome is a big RNA-based machine. It's made mostly of RNA. That what it does is it can take amino acids from the environment and stick them together to create long proteins. And this thing would have been great for any organism that depends on, or any RNA organism that depends on proteins, larger proteins. Having a friend or someone in your environment that's producing them would be a huge benefit.
So the ribosome is like this protein RNA complex that helps you convert RNAs into proteins.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
How would a ribosome presumably would form in a way that it could also like self-reproduce? How do ribosomes reproduce now, and how would they have at the time?
Well, okay, so the early ribosomes would have been very simple compared to modern ribosomes, and so today the ribosome uses the genetic code to build very specific proteins. So you get a messenger RNA, and that messenger RNA can actually guide the production of a very specific protein. But early on, it would just be, creating random chains of protein. And so if you...
Like whatever it came across, it would just convert it.
Right. The neat thing about it is that all of the enzymatic properties of a ribosome are actually RNA based. So it would have started out as this chain of RNA that has an association with small proteins that nature is providing it, that the environment is providing it. And then it would develop this ability to catalyze amino acids into small chains, which it needs anyways for its own support. And then other chains of RNA would be benefiting from this as well, because this thing keeps on spitting out chains of protein, and they can use them to stabilize their own structure. And eventually you get a type of symbiosis between transfer RNA, messenger RNA, and ribosomal RNA. So
you're starting to look at like the building blocks of now how our modern DNA to RNA to proteins chain sort of works.
Right.
Okay.
The big innovation in early life was the modern genetic system, which has a fully functioning ribosome, has fully functioning transfer RNAs, which bring amino acids to the ribosome so it can make proteins out of them. Mm-hmm. And it's got messenger RNAs, which basically tell the ribosome which amino acids to add next when a protein is being built. And so now we have a system where specific protein, instead of random proteins being built, extremely specific proteins can be built that the cell uses for its existence. And so that the evolution of the ribosome is the big historic moment in the origin of life that kicked off cellular life as we know it. And viruses do not have a ribosome. That's what viruses lack.
Okay.
This is the defining trait.
This big converter, which is essentially how you go about building anything. That the fundamental part of life that kickstarts life to actually convert your data to machines.
Functional protein.
Which is really what you need to, like, if you think of a modern cell as like you've got a template on a hard drive, and then you can send that to this factory that essentially allows you to eventually replicate the entire factory along with the hard drive. So you can, so you've got the hard drive in the virus, but you don't have the converter system. You don't have the you don't have the 3D printer or whatever metaphor you want to use to actually take that data and turn it into something else. And that converter is the ribosome fundamentally.
Right.
I'm getting a lot of I'm getting a lot of spam in the chat saying that people are thirsty, and so we're just gonna take this moment for a moment to take a sip of water. This is your hydration moment. Take out your glass of water. Rehydrate your voice. That's tasty good. And this has been your hydration moment.
All right.
Oh, look at that, wonderful. An octave up. Okay, I want to get back to origins of viruses, though.
Yes.
Because, So there's the one pathway where it's they never have that key feature that everyone else speeds ahead, gets ribosomes, becomes cells, goes on their merry way. Viruses at some point, I guess, latch on to like parasitize the early cells so that they can keep up, and then they get better and better in that and go on from there. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, there's a little bit more that we need to understand here, and I'm sorry if this is I'm curious. Is this too technical for the audio? I
think I'd like to get like a broad overview of like what we're trying to say, and then maybe we can dive into the details.
Yeah. So, okay, basically there are three ways that viruses could have got their start. They could have got their start at the very beginning of life, and they're just simple versions of life that never gained a ribosome. That's one possibility. Okay. The other possibility is that they are escaped genes. So there are lots of genes called jumping genes in animals that can actually jump from one species to another. They have the ability to make copies of themselves.
They can jump from one species to the other.
Yeah. So normally in your cell, they have a copy paste mechanism where they try to make copies of themselves inside of your genome.
Okay.
But if you cut yourself and another animal gets cut as well, they can actually jump into another species. So we see this happening quite a bit, or evidence of it happening quite a bit. A lot of times insects that are parasites on us will have some of our genes in them, and vice versa. We have some like some bits of mosquito DNA floating around in our chromosomes. I actually don't know if we have mosquito. I've never seen that, but I know for sure that there's like so bats and frogs get them, and they get them from a common parasite. It's the research on this is new, but we know that it does happen. We don't know how significant that is for evolution, but we know that jumping genes are a thing. And then in bacteria, you have these things called plasmids, which do the same thing. A plasmid will replicate on its own, independent of the bacteria's genome. It will replicate. And when bacteria come in contact with other bacteria, that plasmid can cause the two bacteria to fuse together, and it will jump from one to the other. So there are lots of these little gene-only critters that can infect and get into other species through horizontal gene transfer. A bunch of different processes, actually.
I've always heard plasmids talked about as like I mean, people tend to anthropomorphize things whenever it's at all
Yeah.
possible to do that. But people talk about them as kind of this like this friendly like sharing system between bacteria, right? Where it's like, look, the way that we can help each other to combat antibiotic resistance or
Yeah,
whatever it
that's
is. I
not
mean,
what's actually happening.
I,
But
I, I know it's I like I clearly there's no will on the part of bacteria. But do you think that like like in bacteria are they mostly like is the cell mostly in control of that process, or is it easier to think about plasmids kind of like infecting a host and
yeah,
then moving to another host?
so the best way to think of a plasmid and a jumping gene is that plasmids and jumping genes are symbionts.
Mm,
So they can be parasitic symbionts, they can be mutualistic symbionts. Um, they don't have to do anything at all. They could be neutral symbionts,
right.
and evolution will pull them to one side to be enemies or friends, um, back and forth throughout evolutionary time. That and they'll be sometimes they'll be cooperating with their hosts, sometimes they'll be at odds with their hosts' best interest. But a lot of times the all the proteins involved in uh, the plasmid jumping from one bacteria to another, oftentimes those proteins are actually encoded on the plasmid itself. So the plasmid is controlling that. Not
Hmm.
always, but oftentimes. And hold on,
Oh,
I'm having
we
some.
hear some canines. Should we take a break and uh do you have things that you have to take care of with the dogs, or are we good?
No, actually, I think it's been handled.
All
So
right,
okay,
sweet.
so all I'm trying to say here is, so we maybe viruses come from the origin of life.
Mhm.
Maybe they are specially evolved genes that have escaped the cell, and in order to call it a virus, it has to actually be able to encase itself and live in the environment for some period of time to spread from one organism to another. Plasmids don't do that. Plasmids go directly from one bacteria into another bacteria.
Hmm.
Jumping genes don't do that. They go directly from one cell into another cell. To be a virus, you have to be defined as a virus, you have to be able to code for a protein shell that allows you to survive in the wilderness for a bit of time.
Okay.
That's the big
Yeah,
difference.
your little space capsule. You're a jumping
Yeah,
gene that's
yeah,
blasting off into the wide outdoors beyond the biological frameworks, hanging
right,
around and hoping to land on a different planet.
right.
Okay.
And so that's the second hypothesis. The last hypothesis, which I think is probably the most common source for viruses,
Hmm.
is that viruses are just extremely atrophied parasites.
Hmm.
So again, we know that a virus can still in its genetic code, or in its genome, it still does code for proteins. It codes for proteins that allow it to build this capsid and so
Okay.
on. But it does not have code to build a ribosome. It cannot build a ribosome. So that's the big issue with the thing that defines a virus, is that it can code for protein, but it does not have its own ribosome. It has to be a parasite and use someone else's ribosome in order to make copies of itself.
Right.
And we know that when a parasite enters into a host, when an organism becomes a parasite, a lot of organisms start out as predators and then they end up becoming parasites. And then as soon as they do, they rapidly lose all the organs that they no longer need when they're living inside this other organism or feeding off this other organism. And we see over evolutionary time a very rapid atrophy of traits.
Hmm.
And a virus might just be a parasite that atrophies so much that it no longer has a ribosome. And that's it.
Okay. So they would mostly be like these would be bacterial parasites, I suppose, like some form of bacteria that starts out just infecting you like bacteria do, gets
Yeah, it
so
doesn't.
comfy that it can and integrated with a host that it can lose its cell wall, it can lose its ribosomes, it can lose basically everything except that basic copy of itself and feed off the rest from you.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be bacteria. It could be a eukaryote. It could be like an amoeba. It could be a cancer even. So we have dogs have a cancer that transfers from one dog to another. And it's like it's a cancer that turned into a pathogen. So it's a cancer that turned into a transmissible parasite, which then could turn into a virus.
So
It
it
could
could this could
simplify.
so it's currently a one like a single-celled organism whose ancestor is a dog, and it
Right.
could become a virus whose ancestor is a single-celled organism whose ancestor is a dog.
Yeah. Yeah. Evolution doesn't happen linear. It
What?
happens every which way. Um,
Oh wow. So
this
is that likely that that might happen to any given thing?
absolutely, yeah. There's nothing saying it can't. And we know that parasites will, anything that you're not using will be atrophied. If natural selection is not maintaining a complex system, that complex system will degenerate.
right. Yeah,
And
you can see that if you go into a cave, like look at cave
yeah,
fish that have no light, and it's like, oh,
right,
you wouldn't think that pigmentation was much of a like drain on the system, and yet all of those fish are
pale.
completely
Yeah,
dispigmented. You wouldn't
yeah,
you'd think that maybe you might have eyes, but time and time again, you find creatures if there's no light, the eyes are gone. They might still be
right,
triggerable somehow if like it's just degraded enough that the signal has been lost, but yeah.
yeah. Well, think of it like this: from an evolutionary perspective, think of it like you're a soldier, you're at war, you've got your gun, you've got your helmet, you've got your bulletproof vest, you've got all this equipment that you're lugging around,
Mm.
and then the war's over, and you'd go try and get a job. If you bring your gun and your helmet and your war vest, people aren't gonna be comfortable with you. You're carrying around a bunch of extra weight, so
I suppose it depends. If I can point the
yeah.
gun at my friend and say, "Hey, give me a job," I
Well, yeah.
find an
Or if
alternate
you're
use for it.
if you're going to be a security guard,
But
but
it needs to continue being useful.
right.
Yeah.
And if something has any weight to it, it's hard to produce in any way, and it's not useful. It's immediately well, not immediately, but very quickly. Um, if you have any offspring that just don't have that trait, they're going to be better off than your other offspring that do have that trait, and they're going to end up having more offspring themselves.
Just
So
from like a
natural
purely
selection,
like metabolic energy conserving sort of perspective, like it
yeah,
just takes a little more energy to lug this
right.
casing around or whatever it is.
Right. I mean, think of the human body and how streamlined it is. Like, there's very little extra to us. You know,
Mm.
people will say that the appendix might be extra. They'll say that there might be a couple of things you could point to, but it's almost nothing. Like, we are very streamlined for what we do. Uh, and this is even more true of a microbe, which is going to evolve faster because they have such a quick reproduction time.
Mm.
So uh, it's very likely. I would say that most viruses, right now, it's kind of we can't prove which of these three hypotheses is correct.
And
I would say
there might not be one origin to all viruses, I suppose.
exactly. I think probably all three of these are correct, but I would say the most common would be a parasite that no longer has a ribosome.
Wow.
It can still code for proteins, but no longer has a ribosome. Yeah.
It feels like something that I don't know. I suppose there's a problem in. So you're saying there could be organisms that are not viruses, but that are the ancestors of viruses, like bacteria or eukaryotes or whatever. There are
Yeah.
also bacteria and eukaryotes that have viral DNA in them that's been put in there because a virus infected them and it got pulled out and added to their genome. Is there a way to tell the difference between those two so you can tell like this virus came from a dog versus this dog is part virus?
Um, well, yes. So I don't know enough about it to tell you exactly how. However, like HIV is one of these viruses that inserts its genome into its host, and it leaves really clear markers of an insertion.
Mm.
And I don't know what those markers are. I just know that biologists who study it say that there's markers. So yeah, that's as much info as I can give you there. But
Okay, fair enough.
um,
What's the best guess on where coronaviruses come from? Any idea?
well, Yeah, well, their origin, I don't know.
Yeah,
They're
because they
uh,
seem weirdly bacterial in some ways, right? Like they've got a or like they seem more like cells in some ways because they've got this lipid membrane around them. They've got membrane proteins spiking out. Except for their lack of metabolic machinery, you could think of them as like, oh, that's a little cell floating around.
yeah, you could. I mean, really, again, the only way to define a virus from a cell is that it doesn't have a ribosome. So the yeah, that's the big difference.
Mm.
Um, let me. I need to talk to Marilyn real quick.
All right.
If you want to do
Yeah, I
some
can I can take
music or
some
something,
I can take some stuff from the chat, or I
yeah,
can I can do a song or something like that and
yeah.
see what people are into.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, go
One
ahead.
second.
Take five or whatever. Well, hi guys. We're gonna let John go and talk to his wife. I'm sorry for ignoring the chat over here. I do see your post saying, "Hey, you're ignoring us," but usually when I'm doing these things, it's just it's just me and you. But now we've got a friend, and I've got to talk to him and keep the conversation going here, and it's a little more of person to person interaction. But I still love you guys. MD Fardula Khan says the appendix is not extra. It's used as a storage unit for bacteria. That helps digesting food. Yes, I think I had heard that.
All right.
Right, we got John back for us right here. Let's go back there. Hey, things are good.
Things are good. I'm wondering if we've got any questions about
Yeah,
all
let's
the things I spattered out just there.
here. You look for questions, and I'll play sweet
Okay.
soulful music. If you got questions for John, so we can make this more interactive, put them in the chat.
I'm not seeing direct questions here, but
A lot of chat about how we're ignoring the chat, right? Well, if you want us to not ignore the chat, now's your chance to ask us something pertinent and important.
okay. So Kyle says, how have humans evolved recently, if at all? I would say the most recent evolution would be the different phenotypes that we see in different environments. The most obvious phenotype difference is how much skin pigmentation people have. If there's a lot of sunlight, people have noticed for a long time that there's a direct relationship between how much UV radiation there is in a particular environment and how dark or light the people's skin is that live there, if they've lived there for a long time. And so the more UV radiation you have,
And
the darker the skin.
This is beyond tanning, because
Right.
Like that's nothing to do with genetics.
Right. Well, I mean, tanning is a genetically controlled process, but yes. So the default amounts of skin pigmentation, and there's two types of skin pigment. There's a red one and a brown one, and it doesn't seem to matter a whole lot which one of those. So some people, the mutation that they end up having to protect themselves from too much solar radiation ends up being the red one, and other populations it's the brown one that just ends up getting used more. So you have, some of this is just based on chance, whichever mutation happened to be. But we see a very strong correlation. Of course, now that everyone's mixing, we all live all over the world, this pattern is going away. So you have to look at ancestral groups.
Right. And also things like sunblock and vitamin D supplements will probably destroy any sort of particular selection effect of that, right? Because I imagine it's a trade-off between having your skin get burned and getting insufficient UV to get
Yeah.
enough vitamin D to support yourself. Like that's a pretty clear. There's a pretty clear proper window of here's how much sun you want on your skin.
Yes. Yes. And actually, so people originally thought it maybe was cancer that was doing this.
Hmm.
So there was a selection factor. And they're like, nope, it's not cancer, it's vitamins, it's vitamin processing. So vitamin D is one of several vitamins that your skin synthesizes or somehow metabolizes using, and it needs sunlight for that. So there's several different vitamins, and some are really important, especially for mothers when they are pregnant. So if you have, if you don't have enough, then your skin will become more pale over evolutionary time, and to accommodate that if there's not enough sunlight in your environment. And so yeah, that's I think skin color is probably the most obvious evolutionary adaptation that you can see in humans from one population to another. But there's a bunch of other ones like metabolic. Uh, there are regions where they've eaten mostly fish and meat. Their diet is almost exclusively fish and meat.
Okay.
And they tend to do really bad on sugary diets that Western culture has introduced to them. They get obese really fast on sugary diets because it's just not something they're used to processing. You have the opposite effect where certain populations don't do well on meat. You have the other really big obvious one is the ability to digest milk. So populations that have had dairy for a long time are usually really good at digesting milk, and populations that have not had dairy very long are lactose intolerant. So
that's a switch that gets disabled. Is that right? Because everyone has the ability to process milk when they're a baby because we drink milk, and that like it's not a difference between cow milk and human milk. It's just you can have milk and then you can't have milk. Like the lactose is the same.
Right. Right.
And then I guess there's some sort of developmental switch that gets flipped whenever the window is to stop having milk. And I guess like ancestrally, is that just again one of those things like anything that isn't useful directly right now is costly, so we're gonna turn it off? Is that why that switch would be flipped around the age of 2 or 3 or whatever it is?
Yeah, producing these enzymes to digest lactose, you're just producing enzymes that go into your stomach and then just do nothing. And then, or I don't know if they go into your stomach or if they go into your saliva. I think they go into your stomach, or your intestines.
Yeah.
But building a bunch of stuff for no reason is, that's a problem. So
then you see this switch get flipped off, get like turned off, I guess, and lactose tolerance being a thing for life. It correlates with societies that have started using, like, having agriculture, having animals around, and now they're drinking animal milk their whole lives.
Yeah, and to think about that, you just think in any population, there's some people who cannot turn off this gene because of a mutation. And for most of those people that have that, if they're in a place that does not produce dairy at all, that's going to be a disadvantage for them. They're going to be producing all of these enzymes their entire life, and they're going to be slightly weaker than everybody else and not know why, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not going to be
much.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it will be over evolutionary time. It's enough to slightly shift your frequencies of that mutation up or down.
Right. But then you have a culture that's starting to raise cattle, probably for meat or for blood. A lot of people consume blood too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, a lot of people eat blood, they cook it. It's blood pudding and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's true. My mom used to eat blood pudding on her farm when she grew up. It's not that far removed from me.
Yeah, and there are cultures that drink urine too. So yeah, there's all sorts of stuff that people use animals for, and people freak out when I say that people drink urine. But if you drink cow's milk, that's no more. That's no more weird, right?
What do you get out of urine, though? Because generally urine is supposed to be all the byproducts and the things that you've filtered out and your body doesn't want anymore.
Oh, yeah. There's certainly not a whole lot of protein, but there's stuff in it. There's micronutrients, all kinds of micronutrients that one animal might not use and you might use. So there's
Okay, something
That
might be a waste
yeah.
product to a cow that is needed for you.
Yeah, and most of the cultures that drink urine, they're desert cultures.
Hmm.
And it's easy to see why that would start because when you're traveling long distances through the desert, sometimes you have to drink urine. and and
Fair
you
enough.
could see developing a taste for it, right? And then
Hmm.
it probably would even become like oh, if you're really tough and you travel a lot in the desert, you drink urine and you like the way so you could easily see a culture glorifying this and it
Right.
turns into a food. It
And
turns
how
into something that
and
tough people
however it
drink.
needs for and whatever it takes for you to survive that and use it, that will proliferate very quickly.
Someone put Bear Grylls in the comments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, maybe Bear Grylls is actually a mutant. I don't know.
yeah.
Like the people always say don't drink urine if you're in one of these situations. Is that just because of the salt content?
I don't know.
Hmm.
I haven't studied the pros and cons of drinking urine, but
Fair
I
enough.
know that camel urine is an obvious life saving drink
Hmm.
in people who travel through the desert on camels. So,
Fair
and actually,
enough.
that was when MERS broke out. That was one of the specific things that had to be said is no more drinking camel urine because camel
Interesting.
urine was it's in some cultures camel urine is like a thing,
Okay.
like it's like a manly drink.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, I
but
can see that.
yeah, so what were we talking about?
We're talking about camel urine over here. We're talking about drinking your own urine. This is what you should take away from this conversation.
Yeah.
Hold on. This is going to be your daily hydration break. If you've got water,
Yes.
go
Yes.
for water. If you don't, Jon Perry of Stated Clearly says that camel urine is just fine and you should enjoy it.
No, actually, I said it might give you MERS. Don't do it.
I guess we should make that clear. Yes, don't drink camel urine. Other types of urine, it depends. There are lots of
Well,
viruses and lots of
how
creatures.
about this? Pasteurize your camel urine before drinking.
Pasteurize your
Right.
camel urine. All right, that's this. This has been your hydration moment uh, with Jon Perry, very professional evolutionary YouTuber, over 300,000 subscribers, giving you all the latest news on which urines are safe to drink and proper preparation of such in such procedures. Uh, I don't know where do we want to go with this conversation now?
We do have one comment
All
by
right,
Abdallah saying that the U.S. military advises that you can drink urine in a desperate
really?
situation
Okay,
to prolong survival.
all right. It's better than nothing.
If we can get a second confirmation of that,
Yeah, someone who has experience with the U.S. military and urine drinking, or at least proper desert survival procedures as codified by them.
yeah. I do know Bear Grylls did it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you. So
No, it doesn't. But if he survived and if he
yeah,
proliferates his genes, then maybe the next generation will, maybe his kids will do it, and their kids' kids, and their kids' kids, and
yeah.
someday, someday your children will drink urine.
Same as says I have a better solution. Drink water. Yeah.
Yeah, but
If you have water, go
if
for
you
it.
if it's gonna if you're are you trying to maximize survival or fun? I think is
Oh,
the proper question here.
yeah.
Or like toughness. Like what happens when like it's pretty rare. This is one thing you said something to me at one point, which is that like this is possibly this pandemic is like as morbid to think about and as you should not take it as this is a good thing because actually I wanted to have this conversation with you because you said
Yeah.
we're kind of witnessing like something that could be called a major selection event in
Yes.
people. And when you say selection, immediately people think of selecting the best and like culling the weak or whatever. But
Yeah.
my understanding is from like a survival of a species standpoint, every selection event is a negative, right? Like because while you're like exponentially growing, you're keeping all of your genetic diversity and all of your possibilities open. And then every time
Yes.
there's a selection event, you're shutting down certain possibilities. and you can kill off those, and all the rest will survive your current challenge. But anything that was like correlated with those particular populations, that's going to die along with them. Now your population no longer has access to that. And if you go further and you encounter another challenge that could have been solved by that part of the population,
Yeah.
you have no is that accurate? Like I've
Yeah. What you're saying is right. And I want to read a question from King Gaming, because that his, or I don't know if King must be a boy, right? A male.
I presume
King.
I think King Gaming is named George, so yes, that would be a fair
Oh
bet.
yes. So his question is, do you think that we are getting more and more fragile at an exponential rate, with a scale of hundreds of years? No, we are getting exponentially more diverse, genetically diverse, which makes us robust to selection events.
Mm.
So right now, in Western cultures, not just Western cultures, and cultures with good healthcare, and good support for the poor and weak, among us, and disabled. What we're doing is we're allowing, these genes that maybe cause illness in our current environment, or cause disabilities in our current environment. We're allowing those to thrive. Most people that have obvious disabilities don't thrive extremely well. So you're still getting it's the vast majority of people who are surviving and reproducing and having lots of kids are still, the healthy, strong ones. But what we're doing right now is we are just increasing the amount of genetic diversity in our population, because we've not completely erased, selection pressures. There's lots of selection pressures on fetuses. There's a lot of ways to die in the womb before you're born.
And there's tons of cultural selection pressures that are,
right.
Like when you get into mind and sexual selection, we're still quite picky about the people we choose to have children with.
Yeah. And now, there's a lot of selection pressures on our species.
Yeah.
But we are letting a lot of diversity build up, and some of this genetic diversity manifests in the form of what we would consider diseases, because they don't let us live, a full lifespan of other members of our species, right? But who knows what's going to happen in the future? Building up genetic diversity is what we want to do. It's a good thing. It's a good evolutionary strategy, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe some mutation that gives people a heart disease will actually save them from a heart parasite that kills you when you're 2, that's going to come into existence soon. So yeah, you only live till you're 30 because you have this heart mutation, but everyone else dies when they're 5 or 2. So you have this genetic diversity that can save us from a future, selection event. Right now with this virus, we are seeing a pretty mild selection event. It's going to spill through our population, and it's going to wipe out a chunk of people. But I don't think it's really going to have. I think it's going to have a bigger cultural effect than it will a genetic effect.
Okay.
Because of who it's killing. It's killing people generally that are older, so they've already had their kids. They've already spread their genes. So it's not really going to have, I don't think, much of a genetic effect on the human population. So I don't think it's going to have much of an evolutionary effect on us, but it's going to have a dramatic effect on our culture. I mean, where the millennials need to take the helm, right?
Yeah.
If this really does just get loose and kill millions of people in the United States and Canada, like it's going to dramatically change our culture. So that for sure is happening. But the Spanish flu was killing younger people more, and that had a dramatic genetic selection event on the human population.
Is that measurable? Like,
I actually haven't looked at studies to see if it is, but I believe there is a study on the plague in Europe showing that it did have a measurable phenotype or genetic effect on our species. So yeah, I haven't looked at the Spanish flu, but it was killing young people almost exclusively. It was actually ignoring older people, which is interesting.
Hmm.
Uh, but they would get it and they wouldn't have horrible effects. But it seems right now that the current virus is killing. It's killing smokers. It's killing people that there's a worry that it might kill people that are obese more than normal. And so we're going to see we might see a cultural selection event against smoking and obesity, but
Hmm.
I don't think it's going to have a genetic effect on us,
Okay.
or so much of one.
Yeah, I suppose if it becomes endemic in to the point where like if this virus just became presuming the age profile remains and it doesn't mutate in any significant way, if this virus becomes endemic, then eventually it just becomes pretty much the way like the chicken pox is now, right? Where like probably everyone would get it when they're a kid and they wouldn't have a very strong reaction to it and everyone
Mhm.
would become immune and you would go about your daily life. And I suppose that would like it that in that case it would become like just one more of these like low level constant pressures on humanity. Like every time you have a kid who happens to for some reason have an extreme reaction to it, which does happen in rare circumstances, then though that would cause a bit of a selection pressure. But since it mostly doesn't affect young people in the first place, that effect is like really mitigated, and I imagine might be like even less than common flus.
Yeah, I think last time you and I were talking together, I said that it's expected that we should get immunity to this after we get infected
Hmm.
once,
Okay.
and that immunity should last several years. And that was me extrapolating from data on other coronaviruses,
Okay.
but I've heard that repeated now by like five other um, actual virologists now.
Okay.
So I was interpreting the data correctly. So we probably will be immune to get immunity to it after we get it. That could last one. People are saying between 1 to 10 years you'll be immune to it, which means that this might not be a thing that you get once and you never get it again, like with chickenpox.
Right. Because
The reason
chickenpox
for
is one
that,
of those
yeah,
retroviruses that actually puts itself into your system, like into your genes. Yeah.
right, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, you can get a relapse of it. It's called something else when you get a relapse of
Shingles,
chickenpox,
I
but
think.
yeah, shingles. There you go.
Yeah.
Um, but the I we can be fairly confident that this virus is going to evolve to be more benign in the future.
Hmm.
So it, it doesn't want to kill us. There's no reason that it benefits from killing a person because it's a respiratory infection. Once you die, you stop respirating,
Hmm.
you stop coughing, and so it's bad for the virus. The virus wants you to cough on people. That's how it wants. It doesn't actually want anything, but the virus survives and reproduces better when you're coughing on people than when you're not coughing on people. So the ideal situation for a virus like this, if it keeps infecting just the respiratory tract, which is what it seems to be doing right now, if it maintains that course, it's going to be evolution is going to pull it to be more benign and give people mild coughs that will allow them to still go out and interact with people and cough on them because
Right.
that's its best bet at surviving and reproducing. So we should see it evolve to be benign as time goes on. There, of course, are weird things that can happen where it, you know, how can I say this? If you eat leaves and you're eating leaves on a tree and its way to avoid you eating its leaves is to grow taller, you could go one of two ways. You could grow a longer neck over evolutionary time
Okay.
so you can reach those leaves, or you could start eating bark,
Hmm.
which is actually worse for the tree.
Right.
So there are ways that evolution could pull this virus in a way that does end up making it nastier, but most likely it's evolution will pull it to be more benign.
Right.
So I
So,
don't
for
think
example, like evolution might make it more robust in smaller aerosol particles, right? And
right.
that like you could imagine that if there's a mutation arising that pushes it more towards like measles type thing, which can hang in the air for for long periods of time and over long distances, then that would be like, if it managed to do that, that would be very advantageous to it, and would also
Yeah.
make it spreadable even if people aren't in close contact and aren't coughing. And does that is that a hard thing to evolve? Do you have any idea about that? Like, does it
Yeah.
depend on the macro scale structure of like a coronavirus just cannot do that? Um,
Well, yeah, to make an aerosol small enough to stay in the air indefinitely, is that what you're asking?
well, I'm asking because it seems like there are some viruses like the measles that they just hang around in the air, they survive fine, they waft across the room and they infect someone like over there, right? And that's
Yeah.
why measles has like this replication rate of like 15 or 20.
Yeah.
And also why it can be so deadly because it doesn't require you to be healthy and walking around and coughing on people directly. You can just be lying
Right.
there and it'll spread itself. And
Right.
so I'm wondering what allows it to do that, and is there like a structural effect of like the broad scale structure of like a coronavirus with its lipid membrane that prevents that, or what are we talking about?
I'm not sure why measles is able to do that. But one thing I know about the coronavirus is that if you dry it out, it usually breaks apart.
Mm.
So there's this balance for an aerosol, which for those who don't know, an aerosol is just a water particle, a glob of water that's so small that it can just kind of bounce around in the air without falling to the ground. It's light enough that it won't hit the ground. And aerosols can travel super far. I mean, they can travel for miles before they'll hit the ground. And the problem is that if the aerosol is too small and dries up, then the virus will die. So I'm thinking from the virus's perspective.
Mm.
If the aerosol is too big, it's going to hit the ground quick and no longer be viable. So there's kind of a sweet spot for a respiratory illness where the aerosol is really small, but not too small, that where you risk actually drying up the virus.
Okay.
So I think that's
so a virus that's properly airborne would be something that's like that doesn't dry out. Its droplet can evaporate and it'll just hang around.
Yeah.
Land on
probably. I've never read anything on this, but I would suspect
okay.
that's what would do it. Yeah. If you could be cool, totally dried out. Yeah, you can. I mean, there are dust clouds that go all around the world. We get smog from China. That's aerosols. We get aerosols from China in Canada. They're constantly coming in.
Wow.
So you could actually get airborne enough that you could go global without airplanes and so on, if you could be dormant for long enough. And I'm not trying to scare people. I'm just saying that's a possibility.
You just need to put like a tardigrade and a shrink ray, and then make it right. Real able to infect your own cells and give away its ribosomes.
Yeah.
Ultimate super predator.
Ebola is particularly nasty because it survives on a dead body for, I think it's like 10 days or something.
Wow.
And it's shed from dead bodies for a long time. But as soon as you change the burial culture, that's no longer an advantage for the Ebola virus.
Mm.
So as soon as, the big problem is that people want to bury the bodies and touch them and so on. So that's where the problem happens. If you immediately stop that culture of touching the dead bodies, you stop Ebola from spreading. And that's why Ebola has been pretty easy to stomp out. I mean, obviously not super easy. It's cost millions of dollars in international intervention to stomp it out when it starts, but it's easier than a coronavirus because it doesn't spread in the air so easily.
We've got an interesting question in the chat from MD Fardula Khan. He's saying, I've heard that there's a lot of microorganisms in the clouds. Is that true? Can viruses travel like that?
Not only are there a lot of microorganisms in the clouds, bacteria and so on, but some of them are responsible for our weather. They can actually induce rain.
Wow.
This is very new. We found a species of bacteria in California that will actually position itself in the top of a bubble. Like it does this, it directs itself to the top of a bubble in sea foam. When that bubble pops, it spits it out into the air. And when it wants to come down, it will produce an enzyme that attracts water molecules to it and causes ice to form if it's high enough, if it's in a cold enough spot of the atmosphere. It actually induces ice formation, ice growth, and the formation of a water droplet so it can fall back down to the ocean or to Earth.
So its method of transit is evaporation or like aerosolization and raining itself down upon new parts of the ocean.
Yes, yeah. It
That's damn impressive.
when it's too crowded, there's not enough food, or something's wrong with its environment, it positions itself to leave. It evacuates.
This is one of
And
those man. This is one of those examples of like where evolution is smarter than like it's one of those moments for me of like, oh right, evolution is smarter than me, or at least like
yeah,
it just searches the possibility space for all kinds of for like every possible advantage it can, and no matter how
yeah,
absurd it sounds to me, it finds it just as easily as things that to me would be the most obvious thing in the world.
yeah.
I would never have considered that.
Yeah, so this bacteria has a way to get up and has a way to come down. You could say at will, but it's when it's when its inner machinery has has run its course, and it's decides, you can say it's calculating through these enzyme interactions that it's time to come down from the cloud. It will form ice crystals on its surface, which make it heavier and heavier and heavier until it falls as rain. And so yeah, there's a thing called cloud seeding, where people use dead bacteria and other things to make dust, and then they squirt that dust into the atmosphere to cause droplets and cause rain
I
to
didn't know we
fall.
were using bacteria for that.
Yeah,
I never
using
knew what was in
bacteria
it.
and dust and other things. I think the most common thing used right now is like a silver. I can't remember what it is, but it's a non-organic type of dust. It's not bacteria, but it's being looked into, which is problematic because you can actually steal water. You can distort the watershed in this way
Hmm.
by causing the moisture to fall from the air over your country and sending
Ah.
dry air to someone else. So this is a huge future problem. Like when we master this, it's going to be a nightmare to
Yeah.
manage.
I had a
Yeah.
conversation with oh, what is her name? I'm forgetting her name. Sarah Kaplan, who's a science reporter for the Washington Post.
Yeah.
We were talking about geoengineering, like these possibilities for
Mm-hmm.
like climate change reduction that you could try to like put a blanket of aerosol of some kind over the earth to cool it, or that
Yeah.
you could seed cloud formation and like send salt water up into the clouds to make to raise the albedo of the planet, or make like algal blooms in various places to suck up more
Yeah.
carbon dioxide. And her point was like it was interesting because my point was these are all things that like if any of them work, they don't need this crazy amount of international cooperation and everyone like doing something together, so they seem much more feasible. And her point was that's precisely the problem, because
Yeah. Yep.
one nation with a couple $1 billion can send drone ships out into the ocean and seed the skies of a neighboring country with clouds and change the entire scope of the earth, and then it becomes a huge geopolitical mess.
Yeah. The other problem is that we're doing this all for the first time, and we have no clue what's going to actually happen when we change the weather. Like, I mean, we can model it, we can try and model it, but if you're missing a variable, which you're guaranteed to miss a variable,
Hmm.
uh, you could try and do something to fix a problem, and the whole thing just goes out of control. So yeah, we need to be super cautious. I think the public should be aware that this is stuff that we're trying to figure out how to do, and it's
Hmm.
probably a stupid bad idea. Like I
Well,
I do.
it is the case that we are already geoengineering in a
Yeah,
massive way.
yeah, yeah.
And the question is, are there methods that can combat that, or is trying to do anything further just going to make it worse?
Well, we want to do, if we're going to try anything like this, we need to do baby steps.
Hmm.
Like take it really slow, because uh yeah, there's no problem so bad that you can't make it worse, right?
It's very
uh
accurate, and uh, people don't tend to realize how precarious the status quo actually is when it's
yeah,
always been the case, kept precariously intact. And I think that's part of what we see right now.
yeah. Uh J Lo says
J
acapella
Lo.
science should do another parody of the importance of scientists to consider the ramifications of their research.
You know,
Yes.
I did that. It was my third video, fourth video, depends how you count them. It was called Choose Yourself. It was based on Eminem's Lose Yourself, and it was all about exactly that question, and specifically as it relates to nuclear war, and because that's that's like the great example of that. So yeah, it has been done. It feels like it deserves an update because that was really focused on like military applications of research, and I'm sure there's 100 other directions to take it in. But
yeah, so I've heard a saying that virologists say. They talk about the half pipe of doom. Every technological advancement in virology that we make gives us the ability to fight disease and also gives us the ability to create disease.
Yikes.
And so every advancement brings us higher. So if you just imagine someone skating in a half pipe, and there's like on one side of the half pipe, there's a deadly mess of evil and death. Every time we build the half pipe a little bit higher, both sides go up higher. And you're just creeping towards this day when someone with a $10,000 lab can build something that will destroy, 40% of the species. So you could,
I mean, it depends which side is leading, right? Like you have to propose that there's a $10,000 lab can make something that a $10 million lab can't fight. And is that how it seems to? Is that how it seems to be?
Yeah, it does seem to be that way because it's just
because the universe tends towards chaos.
Well, it's always easier to break something than to build it, right?
Yeah.
Way easier. Like look at this. Look at everything that had to stop because of a virus with probably a 0.6 mortality rate. Like the world shut down.
Yeah.
And it's pretty. Yeah, it's.
Well, you can see that with like the nuclear question as well in terms of we've had the ability to blow up cities for what is it now, 75 years, and we do not yet have the ability to really prevent a city from being blown up.
Right. Thanks, Trinity. Trinity subscribed to Stated Clearly.
Oh, sweet. All right, I'm glad you get. Yeah, everyone, go. I put a link down there. You should go and watch, especially like. I mean, I can plug your video on where new viruses come from. I think my favorite video of yours is the major evolutionary transitions one.
Oh, cool.
Just like that. I think that's the first one I found of yours because I was watching Inace's videos and that was a collab with her.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was one of those like mind blast moments. This like I don't know, this built up layers of symbiosis on symbiosis on symbiosis.
Yeah,
I think we talked about a little bit.
We are a
earlier.
multitude. Yeah.
So go watch that.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Any more questions that people have? Let's see.
I don't know. King Gaming says he was already subscribed to you, so.
Oh, cool.
Question: what do you think of Sweden's strategy for stopping the virus? We're counting on herd immunity.
So what's their actual method? Are they getting people sick on purpose? Or are they just letting it go natural?
I don't know. I mean, I think the smartest strategy that I've seen on that score is as well as you can shelter everyone who might die, do that. Right?
Yeah.
And then hopefully that doesn't include something like the 70% of people who need to get it.
Yeah.
And then you can potentially drop the mortality down to 0 if you have perfect knowledge and you do that perfectly. And then the question of how far you can drop that down is dependent on exactly what your knowledge is and how effectively you can actually implement it. So
okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Sweden's doing.
It says that they're letting it go natural, and that is what he says.
Just natural, but trying not to get everyone sick at once. I mean, not get everyone sick at once sounds like a good bet.
Yeah. Yeah. So the problem is, I don't know the problem is that about 20% of people who test positive end up needing to go to the hospital.
Right.
And that's a huge percentage. So like the hospitals get overwhelmed because this explodes. So what the problem is that the hospital gets overwhelmed and people die for stupid reasons when the hospital's overwhelmed. You die of just, like I said, you could die of a broken bone that's
Right.
severed an artery or something, whereas normally that would be fixed no problem. So it's risky. I am interested to see that different countries are trying different things. You know, the virus is going to shut down a community no matter what, because first of all, people will be scared, so they won't want to go out.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, people will be too sick to go out. So there's going to be some shutdown naturally, even if you don't like have some government shutdown, right?
Yeah, although the shutdown, if it happens naturally, it happens near the peak of the outbreak, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Which at that point is kind of like that's a bit late for the shutdown, for society shutting down to have any effect on the like rate of spread.
Right, but I'm saying it's going to screw up the economy anyways, right? Because you had a shutdown. So the economy will get hit either way, but we have yet to see if the economy is going to bounce back faster if you let it spread naturally, or if you do the social distancing, because I don't think anyone has succeeded in just letting it flow through their country. Like, no one's that brave.
We will see. I feel like like the closest that I'm seeing to that is the rhetoric coming out of the U.S. And
Mexico.
Mexico. Is that what Mexico's doing?
Last I heard, they said, "Screw it, we're gonna hug each other because we love each other."
It's easy to say that before it really hits you, right?
Yeah.
And the question of where that rhetoric meets the road of like actual seeing what's going on around you and seeing people dying, and like I don't know. I have a feeling the calculus changes on that. The problem is that all decisions have a 2-week lag time. And so if the calculus only changes when things are terrible, you have 2 more weeks of terrible, which is about a factor of 10 increase in whatever it is that your current state is.
Yeah. We got an update on the urine.
I saw that.
The military says not to drink your urine, but
right.
it doesn't say anything about drinking other animals' urine.
Also, alongside blood and seawater, I didn't know that you couldn't drink blood in a pinch. Not that I had thought of that, but I suppose in desperate times.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what I would do if I was thirsty to death. I would probably just try stuff until I died.
Yeah. I have wondered occasionally, if you were starving to death, is there any way that you could like cut off your own arm and eat it and give yourself a little more time? I imagine that probably not. But like if you really effectively cauterized it.
Well, you're going to do more damage than good because your immune system is going to react. The stress of that. I mean, you're talking about burning calories, right?
I mean,
how many calories?
You've got less calories now because you don't have to keep an arm alive.
Yeah, but how many immune cells are going to be sent and created to that site? How much energy is going to be burnt in the panic of the involved while you're? I don't know. That's an interesting question.
I apologize. Catherine says ew, and I apologize for that question. I don't know. There's something in me too. You've got your skulls and your tarantulas. I have interesting theoretical questions about autocannibalism that I like to explore. For example, if we get to the point where we can make lab meat, presumably we can make meat out of our own cells. Would you eat it?
I don't know.
Like you like send your skin cell away, they turn it into a steak, they send it back to you.
I suppose if it's already been like FDA approved as a safe thing to consume, because there actually might be prions and other issues with eating your own cells.
Even from yourself.
Yeah.
I could be infected by a prion that I already have.
Yes, because when you cook a protein, it breaks apart and it flips in different shapes,
Mm.
and it can become a prion. So what's a protein in you when it's shaped properly when and at your normal body temperature could, when you cook it, deform and turn into a prion. And actually that's like, prions come about because, like, mad cow disease,
Mm-hmm.
it's been a while since I looked at the research, but they were suspecting that it came about from cows eating cows.
Okay.
Uh, so,
Eating cooked cows.
well, not necessarily cooked cows, but like decomposed cows.
Right.
So proteins will misfold as an organism is decomposing,
Hmm.
and some of those can become prions. So, yeah,
That's
it definitely.
okay. That's very interesting. So, for example, suppose we start getting a weird culture where people steal the cells of their enemies and send them to labs and use them to make enemy steaks for their own consumption. Then it might also become a common practice for people who have a lot of enemies to infect themselves with prions in order to mess with their enemies attempting to eat their cells in steaks.
I don't think we can maintain a society capable of meat cloning that also is at such horrible war that you're eating your enemies. I think those two futures are not compatible
Is
with
it?
each
I
other.
don't know. Is it like does it have to be? It's not like you're eating your actual enemy. You could just swab them from, swab their cell from a glass or something.
Yeah, people are freaking out that cows eat cows sometimes, and yeah, cows eat cows sometimes because all these animals that we think are like herbivores, they will eat meat from time to time, and if there's a dead thing, a lot of times they like to chew on bones and
Yeah. Have
other
you
things
seen
for
that
calcium.
cow just like munching a bird? There's a video of
Yeah,
just like
yeah, yeah,
there's a bird flopping around on the grass and the cow sniffs it and you're like, oh, the cow's gonna be friends with that. Nope. Nope. Cow just
yeah.
munches it right up.
Herbivores are very rarely true vegans. In fact, I don't think any of them are.
Hmm.
I think all herbivores eat at least insects or other things like that from time to time, even just on accident. But they've evolved to metabolize that and make use of it in most cases, so that you're not. And well, technically, a cow eats cheese because they're making this bacterial grass cheese inside their stomach, and they're actually getting most of their nutrients from that bacteria.
Hmm.
They're digesting bacteria. So, I mean, weird side note there.
We're getting a couple people saying things like veganism busted, and I think it would be proper in the in light of the modern pandemic to point out also the other results of our
Yes,
current state of meat consumption.
veganism is not busted. So even if you are a vegan, you're going to be eating insects and so on in your bread that get ground into it. I don't
Yeah.
know if you've ever harvested grains before. I used to harvest grass seed for a living when I was in high school. um, but yeah, there's tons of bugs and stuff in that, and there's tons of bugs in your bread. So everyone's eating a little bit, but no, being a vegan is the I'm not a vegan, but going vegan is the by far the best uh, way to avoid a pandemic in the future, because these pandemics, all of them, it's a jump from a virus from an animal to the human population, and the main thing we do that puts us in contact with animals is eating them. So if you
Mm.
are a vegan, you're no longer supporting eating animals. You're also no longer supporting other people having to work with animals. So you're dramatically cutting back on the risk for a pandemic. Um, and the way that we produce meat right now in America is really bad for the environment, because we produce all this grain, we feed that grain to the cattle, and that's everything's pretty much grain fed.
Mm.
There are certain circumstances where the best thing for the environment would be to eat meat. So, like if you were an Aborigine in Australia, you can't eat grass very well, living in the grass plains.
Mm.
Um, you could till the land, burn it, and then start to garden, but that's going to consume a lot of water, and it's going to cause a destruction to local habitats. So probably one of the better things, the smallest footprint in that situation would be to eat kangaroo meat or eat some animal that can eat the grass.
Right.
So there are circumstances where eating meat or eggs is the best ecological thing to do. That's not the case for Americans. By far, like what we're doing is super destructive. Super destructive.
And you told me that the swine flu pandemic came out of like it. I mean, it turned out to thankfully be a mild pandemic, but it was a pandemic nonetheless. And it came out of our Western pig farming practices. Yes.
Yeah, we think it came from a pig farm in Mexico. It was a factory farm using, American style factory farming. And the fact that it came from Mexico and not America is just lucky for America's reputation. It's not because we're doing something special. So yeah, the way that we produce meat is not sustainable for a bunch of reasons, and one being that it can cause global pandemics. So
do you have like? Is that something that worries you? Like, do you have plans to go vegan? Is this like I really should do this and I will do this? Is it like just this guilt haunts me, but I really enjoy my meat?
Well, I already don't eat meat hardly at all because of cholesterol.
Okay.
I've found that, you'll find studies now saying that it's not meat that causes cholesterol problems. It's sugar. It's other things. But for me, like when I went vegetarian for 2 years to try it out when I had high cholesterol, and it dropped in like 3 months. And it stayed low the whole time. When I started eating meat again, it bounced back up. And so now I'm pretty much, I suppose I'm pretty much vegan at home. There is some meat in my freezer, but
you've actually managed your health with it.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, like because you have a twin brother. Is your brother? Does your brother still have cholesterol problems?
He's had some weight problems the past few years, and so he actually went the opposite way. He went on an all meat diet for a while.
Interesting. You guys are a wonderful lab experiment.
Yeah. But it's just not sustainable. He lost a bunch of weight and then went back to his normal diet, and it immediately all came back. So I think I don't know what he's doing now. I think he's trying just a all around healthier diet. But like right now, my diet is like beans and rice and like guacamole. And it's actually really hard to tell if you care about ecology. So, okay, if you care about viruses, getting away from animals is the best thing to do.
Okay.
If you care about the environment, getting away from meat in America and most places is the best thing to do. At least eating less. But then there's a bunch of other things, like I eat a lot of avocados, and I've heard that avocados are bad for certain reasons. I know that like palm oil is horrible, not because palm trees are bad, but because of the way that we grow them.
Right.
So there's a bunch of like hidden costs to a vegan diet too. But I think it's very safe to say that it's way better. If you're an American, it's way better to eat a vegan diet for the environment than anything else. I don't, because all the soy that's produced goes to feeding cattle. And I think chickens are eating soy now too, or maybe they're mostly eating corn. I don't know what chickens eat.
So we're all one way or another eating converted soy products.
Yeah, and you lose.
Depends on what the converter is.
Yeah, and you lose a ton of efficiency that way, right?
Of course, yeah.
So, but if you really live in a natural grassland environment and you're eating cattle that are raised in that grassland, there are ways to manage that in a way that it's actually probably one of the better things you could be doing. But it's super rare to be in that scenario, and Americans are not in that scenario. So
this has given me one more reason to move to New Zealand and become a herder, which has been my goal for some time. And I think occasionally I've tried to convince you, hey, you know what? We have no reason to be anywhere in particular. Let's go herd sheep, and then we can just live off grass-fed sheep in New Zealand.
Yeah. King Gaming is saying that not all proteins exist there. I think he's saying in a vegan diet,
Depends on your diet. I mean, all the animals, if you have a vegan animal, it got all its proteins from somewhere.
Well, yeah, that's a little bit unrealistic because they actually get it from their bacteria and so on.
Okay.
Like I was saying, a cow is actually feeding off its own gut cheese. Do
the bacteria actually produce some of the amino acids that they need? Like they convert other. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. The bacteria are taking the grass, breaking it down, converting it. So, cows and actually us too, like we eat a lot of bacteria feces. That's a lot of what we actually consume, what our cells actually absorb and love is bacterial feces. So yeah.
Feces, I suppose. I mean, they don't have a digestive tract, but
right.
Waste secretions.
Yeah.
Well, we're 10 minutes from 5:00, which is usually when I end this. Do we have any other topics that we want to talk about before we wrap it up? I could also do a little. I could do the theme song, bring some things in. I don't know where you want to go from here.
Well, was there any other big questions? Maybe we should do a super quick recap because I did get way too much into the chemistry there on the origin of life stuff.
Super quick recap. State it clearly. Go.
All right. The origin of life is an unsolved mystery, but we think that the RNA world or some variation of it is probably likely, but not a pure RNA world. We think there was RNA and protein or protein-like structures very early on. We think that viruses could have 3 different origins. So the actual origin of a virus, the first is that they originated before living cells, and they've been evolving alongside living cells ever since. By the way, there are more virus species than there are any other organism. There are more of them than there are of us, species-wise. The second hypothesis is that viruses are escaped genes from living things. So a gene evolves a way to build a capsule and escape out of a cell and infect another cell. That's a second way for the origin of the virus. And then the third idea on the origin of viruses is that they are extremely atrophied parasites. So they have lost their ability to code for a ribosome, which is the structure that builds proteins inside of a cell. So those are the 3 hypotheses. Probably all of them are the origin of some strains of viruses, but I would say that the most likely, most viruses probably come from atrophied parasites because it's easy for evolution to do that, to take something and strip it down to simpler and simpler parts. It's very easy for that to happen. So that would be my, I would put most weight on that third hypothesis, but it's really hard to prove either of these 3 because there's no fossil record of viruses. So,
there you go. We only have genetic fossils and whatever else, what other clues we can muster from the dust.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's hold on a second. Let's get a little loop going here. Let's see if we can do this. There we go. Does that work? You hear that? Yeah, let's do it. A little different there today. Oh, we're gonna sing about science. 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 Woo! Yeah. We're gonna sing about science. John, what should we sing about? Give us the first verse. We're gonna sing about science.
We got a lag. I can't
Sing
sing.
about
No, I'm not saying you have to sing. Just give me the first verse topic.
Okay, well, it's obviously viruses.
Virus. All right, let's do it.
Viruses have no ribosomes.
We're gonna sing about science.
All right, let's go.
We're gonna sing about.
When we look back into history, there are 3 ways that viruses come to be. That's what we think, although we don't really know. Whoa, oh. The first is that they come from an RA world long ago. NRA world? That's not the thing. An RNA world that went before you and I, though. See, there were some proteins that got wrapped up with the RNA. They use a thing called a ribosome. From that they communicate. Oh, but maybe viruses got left behind. They never bought into the ribo family. Now they gotta use all of us to do their genetic manipulation and representation. Oh, yeah. The second way will come after the chorus. We got science. Oh, yeah.
We're gonna sing about science.
Oh, I'm choking. No, I'm not choking. Okay.
We're gonna sing about science. We're gonna sing about science. We're gonna sing about.
Second way, got no RNA beginning. They come from us internally. They're spinning out from the cell, jumping to other things. Yeah. You see, we got the genes inside, and they like to stay there and hide, and then go out into the other cells of creatures, infecting them. Oh, but those ones don't have a capsule, and there's a limit to how far they can go. You gotta evolve one to be robust outside of cells, yeah. So if you get one that encodes for proteins, it can go farther on the jet stream, or other aerosols in the world go to other things across the room. Yeah, we're gonna sing about
science.
Woo, yeah,
We're gonna sing about science.
come on, we're singing, John. State
We're
it
gonna
clearly.
sing about science.
YouTube.com/stated
We're
Billy.
gonna
Go
sing
on and
about
subscribe.
science.
Yeah.
We're gonna sing about.
There's a third way John has to say. He thinks it is the most likely that virus come from other things, bacteria and maybe some archaeas, maybe also some cells like those that go out of the faces of dogs and go into other dogs and infect them with cancerous slugs. Oh yeah, a virus could be just another cell like you and me, just going round, becoming kind of parasite. And then when they get inside to another organism and they stay inside, they could have anachronisms. Later on, they don't need all the things they brought. Oh yeah, you're gonna sing about. You thought I was doing a chorus there, but I'm not. I'm not done because I didn't explain the whole thing. No, imagine you were a soldier in a war, carrying this gear I don't know what for, so I give it up. I lay it all down. Just like that a virus, when it gets outside of us, it could lose all that makes it able to metabolize and make it on its own. Yeah, infecting as a host, sing about
science.
Woo. Yeah,
We're gonna sing about science.
Yeah, Jon
We're gonna
Perry,
sing
Data
about
Clearly.
science.
Follow him on YouTube.
We're gonna sing about
Me
science.
too. If you came here from his
We're
channel
gonna
or one
sing
of his
about
video
science.
streams, you should subscribe to
We're
this channel
gonna sing
too.
about
Go on the
science.
Discord, etc.
We're sing about science.
All
We're
right.
gonna sing about.
Well, John, thank you so much for coming along.
This is great.
Thank
This is
you.
awesome.
It's been a fun little experience. I hope the people enjoyed the more talking format because I really liked this conversation. Like
Yeah, this was fun.
you blew my mind several times with this one, and
Cool.
I hope we did the same to you. So people in the chat, everyone say thank you to John, and then as you say thanks, I will read off your names. We got King Gaming, we got K Rosego, Anna, Peter Charette, Shino Hoshi is here again, MD Pardula Khan, Ella Jasic, Morgan Harris, we got Anna, and then some symbols. We got KP, Kyle Guy, Metij Bernat, same as Kyle Guy again, Carrie Andrews, Aleka, Tapska. Oh, let's see. We got John Smith, the one and only, Lyrical. We got Volpez, Morgan Harris, Cyrillic that I can't read, Non-Euclidean Dreamer, Audrey P. We got Peter Charette. I gotta scroll up because I can't see. Lucy L24 is in here. The Mamgoozian. We got Katie Clapman, Aurora F86, same as Jeanette Larson, Sarmila Saguaria, Christoph Nagy. We got Trinity Red or Blue Pill. Red or Blue Pill. Okay. Jeff Davis, Casper Ghost, AA Bowser's back. We got Andres Guzman. Volpez is here, of course. Sharmila Saguaria again. Ben the Spaceman. That's one of my favorite names so far. Matt Prosh. We got people mostly repeating now. Ian CD says thanks for this. And John, I want to say to you, thanks for this. This is a really fun time. Catherine, of course, Catherine Rosego says aloha from Hawaii. Until next time.
Aloha.
And so I will say to you, John, until next time, come back sometime. It's been a fun time, and I hope to see you IRL, happily married, and on the other side of this particular pandemic. Sound
Yes.
good? All right.
Soon we'll be able to meet in person, stream from your office.
Yeah. All right. Signing off.
All right.